Okay, I'm going to make this a quick out-of-the-box initial impressions video because, well, we'll get to that in a second. But refer back to the recent videos I've done on butterfly swords, Bar Cham Do. And in those videos, I did express a little bit of concern with durability in terms of tang construction. The Murasame swords, Ba Cham Dao, has a stick tang. It's fairly narrow. So far, it's held up just fine. The Everything Wing Chun flagship lightweight, they call them full tang, but you're still talking about a pretty broad blade sitting on a really skinny tang. Does that create potential stress risers failure points? Well, they haven't failed yet. But I was thinking, okay, what if I could get a set or make a set that would be, up there with certain other full tang blades, like something like a Becker BK9 with a D-guard. Well, that sounds like a pretty involved and expensive project. But in the meantime, to kind of test the theory, APOC swords does have something similar in what they call their dualist butterfly knives. So let's take a quick look at these out of the box. My initial impressions, what I like about them and what I don't like so much about them, how they handle, and specifically potential. All right, let's start with the build quality, specs, fit and finish, and well, while they're in the sheath, let's talk about the sheath. It's a Kydex sheath that reminds me a lot of the Cold Steel Securex sheaths. It is thinner in terms of the material used, but it fits pretty well. We'll see how it holds up over time, but it's got that same potential that the Securex sheaths have in terms of, well, lots of places where I can mount different kinds of belt loops and things like that. So I'm probably going to experiment with it. Because like the Securex sheaths, it came with a kind of flimsy nylon strap. Now, this is actually a pretty stiff one. It's not too bad, and it does have the opening at the top, so you can put it over your belt without having to unloop your belt and stick it through. So that's nice. You'll notice there is a retention strap that doesn't do a whole lot of retention. It's probably there for added safety, because the retention is, well, these lips, for lack of a better term, at the top of the scabbard like a Securex sheath. And they are pretty positive. But unlike a Securex sheath, I had to learn a trick. And there were reviewers out there who complained about this. They had a struggle with it. And I think it comes down to learning a new move. The old move that works with a Securex sheath is using your thumb to basically press at the back. Well, the retention point for these is here at the front of the grip. So what I found I've had to do is get my index finger in there and just kind of work it in there and wedge those apart, and then they come right out. So, ta-da! Going back in, very smooth, very positive. You can also work one knife out without the other one, and then the other one comes loose, but it's just kind of awkward. So you've got a couple of options, but I think I found the trick that makes this work the best. The other thing you're going to see is, yes, these are that half moon bias cut that allows them to sit flat up against each other as if they were one sword cut down the middle. Let's take a look at the interesting part. All right, out of the box sharpness. First, some paper. A little ragged is my impression. Let's try some cardboard. Not too bad, but I think I can make it better. Okay, let's take a look at the blades. As you can see, they fit fairly flat. We'll take a look at how flat they fit up against each other. So that plays into the design, but let's take a look at the specs. To assuage my concerns for durability, APOC is known for making extremely durable, but not necessarily the most refined items. And I think that plays out here too as well. If you look at the inside side where there's no handle scale, you'll see that it is just a solid slab O 9260 spring steel with what I'm assuming is a DLC coating. Now I'm noticing just a little bit of rub on it for where the blades contact each other. We'll see how it holds up, or it might wind up coming off, at least in places. We'll talk about that later. D-guard seems to be reasonably stout. Where I'm concerned there might be a failure point would be in the hook. Just the shape of it and the thinness of it. It looks a little fragile, but we'll see. It's beefier than I thought it would be. We'll talk about how that affects handling and performance and stuff here in a second. But obviously what you're going to notice is in terms of the shape of the blade, it is only beveled on one side. Now I do have Japanese kitchen knives that are like this, so I'm kind of used to the design. It's a little bit weird, but yeah, you can kind of adapt to it. Took a look at that sharpness test I did really quick out of the box. It's got a very sharp but kind of a ragged edge, but it seems to be a nice hardened steel with a lot of potential. I could probably put a really nice edge on it. But specs. Blade comes in just a shave short of 11 inches. You're talking about 10 and 15/16 of an inch, and that's measured from the top of the D-guard here. Now, they said it was not going to have any profile taper. It was going to be a straight blade, and I was thinking there would be no distal taper either. And lo and behold, there's both. Slight bit from the base of the blade here is 1 11/16 wide here at this really kind of short ricasso. And just before the curve, it does thin out to 1.5. So there is some reduction this way. Now, this way it starts out at 7/32 of an inch thick at the base, but tapers fairly evenly to the tip. So there's distal taper. This gives it a point of balance at 3/4 of an inch in front of the guard. Really, really close to the guard. So, yeah. We'll talk about how that affects handling, good and bad. But couple of things about the build quality. How much do they weigh, by the way? Well, that's where we have to get into build quality. Right-hand sword, 1 pound, 2 ounces. Left-hand sword, 1 pound, 3 ounces. Why is that? Well, take a look at a couple of things. See if you can see them. I probably have to get some close-up pictures in here. All right, under the lights. Profile taper and distal. Profile taper is the same. Obviously, you can see they fit just really uniform. But distal taper is off. The right sword thins out a lot quicker and more, well, pronounced. So it has a thinner tip, in other words, than the left sword is what I'm trying to say, not very well. So, The other thing you might notice is you could probably see a little daylight between the blades. And other people have kind of complained about this bug or called it a feature. The blades kind of bend very slightly in towards each other. So when you hold them together, there's sort of spring tension from the tip. And yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to be a good thing or a problem thing, or underuse. Is that going to potentially get worse? I don't know. We'll see. But just so you know, yeah, other people have complained that, yeah, the swords are kind of bent and uneven in their grinds, and it's kind of a first sign of worrisome. Other signs of, well, why I'm doing this is a very, very initial out-of-the-box review. I'm going to make some changes because the grips are not very comfy. Now, it's very interesting. I don't know if you can see it, but they did take the time to put bevels on the inside edges of the D-guard, but nowhere else. So pretty much everywhere my hand is contacting on this inside edge is sharp. Also, if my hand is making contact with the hook, which we'll talk about in handling, yeah, some sharp corners. Also, the G10 scales, yeah, they're rounded on the outside, but if you can see, there's again a pretty sharp drop off. This isn't too bad, but this is where it's retaining into the sheath. I don't necessarily want to mess with that too much, but that is a really sharp corner if your fingers wind up contacting it. So I think at bare minimum, what I'm going to do here really quick is I'm going to rebevel some edges and see if that improves the way it feels. Because it's not so bad when I've done a little bit of cutting in terms of striking into my pels. So basically hitting stuff that give me resistance. And I am getting some hot spots when I do that. I'm also getting some hot spots when I manipulate these. We'll talk about that in a second. But when I thrust, yeah, my hands are ramming into some pretty sharp corners when I stab. And these are, frankly, thrusting profile knives. So let's take a quick look at handling. Okay, before we get to the handling, Mike forgot a little thing, because it is a little thing, but it's an interesting detail, and it's kind of cool, but I don't think they thought it out all the way. What am I talking about? Well, if you look on the inside slab here, you'll see the three screws, right? And then there's an extra little hole at the bottom, which is a lanyard hole. Probably that would make sense, right? But if I flip over to the scale side, there's no hole. Why is that? Well, because, the hole's on the bottom, and you can kind of see the daylight coming through a little bit here. Beveled hole for the lanyard to come out. Now, it would make sense to do something like that if you were thinking you were going to put lanyards on each sword and then you still wanted them to flip flat together, but you put that on the other side. It wouldn't be coming through the inside of the, it doesn't really make sense unless they didn't want to put the extra stress on the G10 for some reason. I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting feature. I probably will never use them, but let's get on to the handling. Okay, I'm not going to do a whole lot of this because, yes, it is kind of uncomfortable. Now, these are lighter than my other two pair of butterfly swords, and the shave shorter and, of course, thinner, because they are, more conventional knife shaped. Now, as I mentioned, I did have, way back when I first started training with butterfly swords, a cast aluminum pair that fit flat together. I've also had a number of other Chinese style swords that come in pairs that are cut like this so they fit flat together and then stick into one sheath. And, there is that legend that, you can pull out one, they think you just have one, and then, you got two, and it's a big surprise. And I don't think you're really necessarily fooling anybody if they take a good look at your hilt or just how thick the damn thing is. But in training, what I found, it's just an interesting exercise tool, because now you're working with something that is, exactly twice as heavy than what you're used to having in one hand, plus the added exercise of having to really work your grip on the thing, really squeeze down to keep them together as you move them. Now, these are actually biased together enough, angled together enough, that I could create a decent enough thrust if I'm holding them in alignment. And actually having this rounder grip on it feels a whole lot better having the scales on both sides. So yeah, that's another reason why I'm probably going to make some changes to them. The edges are pretty close together. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end, but it's certainly not going to move through material like a single blade will. So tactical advantages of being able to hold them together and use them like this is, if I wanted to, just club somebody with more weight, that could be an option, but they really absolutely function better, as they're designed to individually. Now, let's get this question out of the way. Can they flip? Well, on the yes end of that spectrum, you'll notice that the spine of the blade is definitely in line with the back of the grip. But lots of sharp edges on a pretty small hook. And I am concerned that this hook is, it should be more of a trapping hook, but it's not a very deep one, so I'm not sure how positively it's going to trap anything. Now, it certainly could fit a wrist or be used as a striking tool or something like that. but I don't know how well they're going to function for trapping. How do they function for flipping? Well, they're a little tight, but between the size of them, the sharp corners that they've got right now, which I may make some changes to, and the point of balance being so close to the pivot, yeah, that's like moving through molasses. They don't want to flip positively. But because they're more knife-like, they do fit better in a conventional ice pick grip. So they've got that going for them. So I might use it there. You'll also notice that even though it's a shorter blade, if I hold it in a conventional ice pick grip, the way I'm built, yeah, that does reach my elbow. And in the more flipped position, well, I've got plenty of clearance between the crook of my elbow. And again, that's the way I measure swords. My sweet spot is a 12-inch blade for one of these. So an inch shorter, significantly lighter, and a much different balance. Now the bias in the grips, yeah, that does make a difference in handling. It's actually not bad for blade alignment, and I haven't done a lot of cutting with them or anything yet. We'll see how they work, but I don't really want to go out and cut with these until I take off some of those sharp corners, which is why I'm doing this preliminary. And then I'll let you know, well, how they cut, how they feel, how they hold up, how the finish holds up, how the edge holds up, and then get around to comparing them to, well, the other ones that I have. But until then, I think it's an interesting addition to the collection that's got some potential and might inspire me down the road to try making my own set of these once I really have a sense of what I like and don't like and look at what's out there in terms of materials. Yeah, you might see a mic project down the road. These will definitely be kind of a mic project because I'll do an update on these after I make some modifications. Until then, if you have any questions about these, or you have these or other APOC products, let me know what you think of yours. I'm happy to try to answer any questions about these. Let's get our conversation going as usual. Otherwise, until whatever follow-up I manage to do with these, thanks for watching, following, subscribing, liking the videos, commenting, and we'll see you back for potential.